Okay, so welcome everybody. Before we begin, I will emphasize that there is a survey that I'm hoping y'all can answer, which would provide very helpful feedback for our speakers. I'll refer to this at the end of the presentation too. If you have questions, please post them as you have them in chat, and I will field them at the end of the presentation. Hopefully we have about 10 minutes or so for these questions. And so for our speakers, just a quick background for them. I know Antone here has been with Eaton Corporation for about 21 years now. He seems very engineering minded and a very astute individual. Then we have Wilson Darko, who has been with Eaton Corporation for 3 years now. And he is a New York native and an alumnus of the Rochester Institute of Technology with a degree in electrical engineering. Also a huge community outreach member. He has served as a leader on campus in various organizations with an emphasis on mentoring future generations, developing leaders, and of course, cultural engagement. And we also have Rod as well. I don't know too much about you, Rod, but you have a very friendly face, and I'm excited to hear y'all's presentation on the incorporation. So Wilson, I'll let you take it away.
I had no doubt. Yeah, so first off, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilson Darko. As David mentioned, I also have here Antone Abraham and Rod Bayless. We are representatives from Eaton Corporation. I'm not sure if we're able to throw all three of us on for now. But yeah, so in terms of our goal today, we're here to host a presentation to you all just to give some insights on career opportunities in mass when it comes to kind of navigating your career path, as well as some particular strategies that we've all personally implemented throughout our time in our various career levels, and some of those strategies that you can implement into yours as well. So, I'm also going to have my team members give themselves a brief, introduction if they don't mind. So in alphabetical order, I guess Antone was supposed to go first before me, but we'll have
that never gets old. With a double A, I'm always at the front of the line.
There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you today. This is personally my first time getting engaged with LSAMP, and really excited about presenting something that I'm passionate about. Career development is one of those pieces that not many people usually have an exact map to develop it. So it's I guess we can give you some perspective on the 20+ years I've got experience in it. But more importantly, just to make sure we're openly sharing what we can bring to the table. As far as my career, I've been with Eaton for 20 years. I've been in various roles, and we'll get into some of those later on. But definitely some of them are not planned roles that I happen to get into, and I'll talk about those a little later on as well, how those have impacted me and changed my current path and trajectory as well. Looking forward to hearing some good dialogue. Hopefully you make this a two-way discussion and not just us blabbering for a while. So please get engaged. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Rod.
Yeah, Rod Bayless. I'm actually been with Eaton Corporation about 20 years as well. Started in 2002. Before Eaton, worked with in telecommunications with Corning Incorporated. Before that, officer in the Navy. Before that, enlisted in the Marine Corps. Picked up my engineering degree from Auburn, my MBA from Syracuse, and have worked in roles anywhere from manufacturing, engineering, product line management, supply chain management, and currently in program management. Work remotely out of Augusta, Georgia. Have teams that are in India. And one thing about Eaton, you'll find a lot of teamwork across the digital divide. And that means that you're getting emails and requests for calls way early in the morning. And when it's China, way late at night. So be careful what you ask for when you get a global role. One thing I want to make sure you get out of this is that you have three people with a lot of diversity of experience. Please pick our heads. We're going to present some information to you. None of us came through the same path as you heard. And we really just want to give back and try to give you what we can to help you get on your journey. That's it.
Definitely. So yeah, so as Rod mentioned, we're all coming from different perspectives, if you would, very diverse paths that we took to arrive to where we are now. And of course, you know, many more exciting initiatives for us to tap into in the future. But the goal of today's presentation, which I'll share actually, get the ball rolling. The goal of today's presentation is really to help you get some insight on some of the options you can also take as it relates to, you know, your next steps, you know, currently as a student, but also once you start to navigate the full-time space as a, you know, early talent professional. We think it's really critical to know, you know, how did some people navigate in previous examples, you know, both in terms of highlights, any hiccups or challenges as well. So, you know, looking forward to get that started. So first things first, just for some insight in terms of the partnership between LSAMP and Eaton. So yeah, so this partnership has actually been in place for several years now, about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. We actually started this in Michigan. There was an effort to help support one of the research symposiums or research fairs that LSAMP in the Midwest area had during that time. And Eaton was happy to be a host, if you would, for that presentation or that initiative. And really just from seeing the engagement where there was opportunities for students as well as faculty and staff to get more insight on the industry experience, as well as an opportunity for Eaton to expose ourselves in terms of, you know, some of the great opportunities that we have in our various sites, as well as the chances for someone to leverage kind of that research background, but more from an applied side, right? So from that, we've seen over 500 attendees to our various initiatives. Over this time, we've done 5 major events to date, several institutions involved with multiple alliances across the country. As you can see from this timeline, we're currently doing the conference. So, you know, that would be where we are in present time, right? That's the metaverse location for us right now, right? But we also have some future initiatives that we'll be doing later in the month of October and November as well, where we'll have the Eaton Experience, which is also a chance for someone that wants to come to any of our sites in person, particularly in Houston, as well as in Pittsburgh, and then our Golf Pride event, Golf Pride location, just to see the different opportunities available at Eaton, right? So if you want more information, we can definitely touch base about this later. So next up, we wanted to just cover some insights on what, you know, the finances for your career can look like from a, you know, degree standpoint. So we've Antina, if you want to touch on this.
Yeah. So let's just, I guess, at the end of the day, put this thing first. That is money. Well, we all do what we do so that we have financial independence and ability to impact and do more with it. What this graph really is representing is a comparison between 2013 and 2020 from a U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics around, based on your education level, where the median salary falls in. It's no surprise, right? The higher degree that you have, the more investment. It's kind of like your bank, right? The more money you're investing and you're putting away, the better your return is. And that part is pretty true. It may not be the same for everyone. We all know plenty of people that have made it big without certain degrees or otherwise. But by and large, as a mass, more education turns to be a better opportunity for financial security. A couple of things though I do want to highlight is if you look at, you know, 67% higher income for bachelor degrees compared to high school degree, it's quite substantial. If you can make that much more by just completing a bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree post high school, it makes your opportunities, the chances that you can get that much greater. So if you're already on this call, you're already on the right path, you're engaged in your schools and you're looking at ways to grow into that, especially in the STEM world, that's very much positive. The other thing you can also look at is even just the basic higher education or high school education, just having that in itself is much better. But what really changes your, like if you look at it from a timeline perspective, the improvement between 2013 and 2020 in a period of 7 years, the percentage growth in your salary may seem somewhat even, but look at the dollars that you can gain from it. So the high school graduate can go from 33, let's call it 34 grand to 40 grand. That's a 6 grand improvement in 7 years. But when you look at that and compare it to a bachelor degree, that's over 10, and you go to master's, that's $11,000, right? So you could see the rate, the dollars that you can gain growth with it as well. But again, this is just a quick highlight that education is still very much the best path to better financial freedom and be able to do more.
Definitely. And I mean, as you can see, it's always important to be aware of what you're doing this for, right? In terms of your career advancement. There's also, there's always going to be several different reasons why you take down the path that you do. But the finances is a critical aspect, right? Going into education for the vast majority of people, that's not cheap, right? The student debt crisis is one that's always looming across all majors, including STEM backgrounds. So to be able to have a clear understanding of your forward steps is very critical in that regard, right? So to Antona's point, if you're seeking an advanced degree or even just a bachelor's for that matter, having a clear understanding of, what careers can I tap into that kind of get my ROI, it's a business term, your return on investment, right? So your time in academia is that investment. Your time in the earlier parts of your career as well will be an investment. So having an understanding of how you're going to start your journey is very critical, right? So we kind of speak towards these 5 principles as things that are very critical to be mindful of when you're doing that, where when it comes to starting your journey, by far, it's important to see yourself as someone that acts like a sponge, essentially, right? As you're advancing further into your academic experience, you become closer to being a senior or the most advanced person relative to your peers. Plot twist, once you get into the career space, you're a freshman all over again, right? So you become a child very immediately after being the big person on campus and all those exciting things, right? So that being said, it's important to recognize that there's a lot of things that you don't know as it relates to, any technical background, any soft skills that you want to advance in, and just multiple aspects of who you are as a person, who you are as a professional, right? And who you are as a teammate, right? So it's very critical for you to kind of take inventory of those things, navigate that preferably with some kind of advisor, mentor, champion, anything along those lines will be very helpful, right? That being said, it's also critical for you to understand, what is your value add when you come to these spaces? There's of course information that you can learn and glean while you're in these early parts of your career, but clearly you're getting paid for a reason, right? It's not community service. You're not just getting paid because people have money to get rid of. You add value to the spaces that you enter. So in identifying what attributes you bring to the table as a professional, it's very valuable for you to kind of figure out where you want to invest your time, right? So we identify that as your gift. Someone else can call it your great, right? There's many things that you do okay or you do good, but there's certain things that you do great compared to everyone else, right? So if you can identify what your great is, then that kind of allows you to figure out what path is more viable for you, right? In addition to this, there's a belief that everyone has a purpose in life, right? What's the meaning of life? I'm pretty sure it's not cheesecake. I've tried the cheesecake route, maybe, who knows, right? But in identifying what your particular purpose is, whether it's in your career path that you're going down, in the way that you navigate other people and spaces, having an understanding of what your purpose is during all of these times can be very helpful for you, right? That being said, having an understanding of your purpose en route to some kind of endpoint or some kind of destination you're trying to get to can be very helpful. So I would describe that essentially as your goal, right? You don't get a job just to have a job and go day by day. Ultimately, there's some kind of accomplishment you want to get to, whether that accomplishment is a promotion, it's helping you get to the next stage in your career, whether it's a capital growth space or something like that. Even if the goal is you really like this one job and you want to work that towards retirement, right? Being aware of what that goal is and then what the respective checkpoints along the way are will allow you to be more intentional about what your game plan is and how to execute it, essentially, right? It's like ultimately you want to have a good understanding of your strategy, which is your overall plan, the tactics, which are the different techniques that you use to move forward, and your overall vision, which is the, what's your why, right? So the why would be the goal that you're trying to get towards. And finally, and this is something that a lot of people actually get to very late, very often in their career. If you ever heard the phrase, a midlife crisis or something like that, right? You can do all of these other steps very effectively, but unfortunately, you don't actually take inventory of what you're passionate about, right? So having an understanding of what you're actually passionate about, what a good day at work looks like for you, not in terms of the industry specifically, but the different actions that you're taking place in, right? Are you great with people? Do you need a job that allows you to kind of engage with other personalities? Are you a problem solver? And that's really where your passion lies, right? Are you someone that, hey, you're introverted, you're not a people person, you just need to have a problem or some kind of issue in front of you, and you stay at your desk, tinker away at it until you get that figured out, right? All of these things are valuable in many different spaces throughout industries. So having a good understanding of that can be very helpful for you. So that's just something to keep in mind.
All right, so this is really intended to be a conversation, which means not just the three of us talking. Really, he just talked about what's your gift. And so what I would like to do is really open it up to have some of the participants share what their gift is, and then your ideas around the type of industry or the type of roles that you think you could use your gift in. And I'll literally just ask that question, see if we have anyone brave enough to be first.
That's probably the best way to see it.
Because I could get the ball rolling a little bit. For some background, I'm a third-year PhD student, an LSMRCE alumni, and from serving as a teaching assistant or a lab assistant, I found that communicating information is sort of gratifying, and in part allows me to sort of build paths for the people and let them sort of connect the dots to see what they would like to do in their futures. So in terms of a role that's fitting for that, one obvious one is like a professorship that should follow post PhD as one avenue. If there are any brave souls who have, had some introspection and feel like they have a knack at a certain talent, I invite you to speak up. Otherwise, I could brainstorm, I guess, a few more ideas on how.
David, do you mind me asking what is your PhD in?
So my PhD is in environmental sciences, specifically atmospheric science, though my background is in computer science. So I pulled a little 180 in terms of postponing industry for just a while longer to stay in school and stay learning for a little while longer while I pave my own future.
Have you tried to apply any of your computer science background to the atmospheric world?
No doubt. I mean, almost every day. That's at the core of what I do is data analysis, and so my background in Python and C++ has really come in handy for that, and it's an indispensable tool, definitely applicable in what I do.
So,
Awesome.
so you actually bring up an interesting point, right? So you mentioned how your gift is the communication of information, right? Kind of bridging gaps in understanding, if
Right.
you would. But then you also mentioned very technical skill sets such as Python, being a developer or a coder, right?
Right.
And oftentimes a challenge or a disconnect that a lot of people have is thinking that, let's say I like computers, so my passion, my industry, my everything needs to be building computers or something like that, right? And it's like, maybe that's not the case, right? In your case, for example, you can find a specific niche as it relates to being a developer or being a professor or whatever else it is that ties in that technical background, that leverages your passion for kind of engaging with people and helping them understand things. And especially coming from a technical background, finding someone that can actually communicate certain things without, like the high level jargon that most people try to communicate within STEM anything, is usually a bit ambitious task, right? Both in industry and, especially in academia.
I would say, and Wilson, I would say also in leadership, not just a specific industry or role. I do want to share a story, Wilson, that you sparked. And I've been with Eaton about 20 years. And I would say it was about 10 years ago, my office was across from one of our senior vice presidents. And he was responsible for environmental health and safety. And I was working on a project and he said, "Hey, Rod, what are you working on?" And I showed him. And I was working with some data and some statistics, and he broke out statistical analysis and was basically showing me how he saw things. Now, here's a VP who's very high in the organization. He reports to the CEO, but he still takes the time to look at things from his perspective, which is data. And he said, "Hey, Rod, if you take the data and you slice it and you dice it and then you run some algorithms, your answers come up pretty quick, right?" And so I share that with you because, David, that skill set is something that's very transferable. And no matter what you do, you've got to interpret it so that people can receive it, right? Because there's a lot of people that can crank a lot of data, but there's very few people that can actually communicate the effect, the results and what to do with those results.
It's a bit of a storytelling act at that point, yeah. Keeping your audience engaged and understanding is a huge challenge, but very gratifying when it succeeds.
By far. And I mean, to that point, a lot of just any engagement with people is ultimately storytelling, with sales, with marketing, with being a manager of people in any capacity. You're essentially trying to tell a story to people that they walk away from inspired to execute what you need them to execute, right? So, ultimately having those skills are extremely transferable. I'll give an example of even something like cooking, right? To have the understanding of how to finesse a certain meal correctly, you need to have proper timing. You need to have a base understanding of chemistry, right? You probably need a fire extinguisher, maybe, no promises. But many of the strategy behind it are things that you can actually transfer into other spaces, right? Or the attention to detail, for example. Like I'm a big fan of Gordon Ramsay. I'm probably never going to work in a restaurant, but the attention to detail, high standards and all that stuff he says counts the same in several industries, right? So it's important to recognize, and one of the themes that we want to highlight, even with this slide, is that, ultimately, when you get into any part of your career path, you should be aware that it doesn't have to be, super strict and linear. And, let's say I start as a software engineer, I just need to become a senior software engineer, then the lead software engineer, then the VP for technology, then the CTO, right? It might not look like that for everyone. You may make, in some cases, a lateral move into a different sector, right? Or you might make a diagonal move, if you will, a promotion, but still out of the space that you typically work in, right? So it is very helpful to kind of recognize those opportunities are available. And, to that point, I would speak on the path that you're taking, where, when it comes down to it, you're probably not just going to get a full-time role outright. Like, you can go that path, but usually it helps you to kind of sample, if you would. I'm a big fan of Costco. They have the free samples, maybe not now because of COVID, but
in Georgia we have it. Hey, Wilson, let me bring something up on this one. And I know it sounds like a sales pitch for Eaton, but I'm guessing other companies do it. We actually have a marketplace where we can put a task or a job or a project out there and ask for people to volunteer to help solve that problem. Okay, it's called Stretch Assignment Marketplace in Eaton. It's probably called something else in other companies, but it's specifically to give people the opportunity to test the water without having to change career paths. And to me, it's the ultimate of getting experience in an arena that maybe you're not familiar with and delivering some results and saying, hey, is that something that I want to do? Do I like research? It could be a SAM project on research. It could be a SAM project in a plant. It could be a SAM project in program management. We have SAM projects, and I kid you not, they are global. They are across all industries, and they really do go from research to program management. So I share that with you because even if it's not in your company, you can still go and find something. I'll use Wilson's example. If you want to be a chef, go take a class at the local culinary arts school. Now in New York, it's probably pretty expensive, but here in Augusta, it's not too expensive. But if that's something that interests you, don't go through life with blinders on. Really take the time to find your joy, to find your happiness, to find your zen. Too many times, and I know we started out with money, but it gets people's attention, right? Too many times people go down a pathway for the sake of money, and they lose out on their passion. If you take the time to find your passion, the money will come.
By far, and I would say kind of where many of you are in your career path now, being students, it'd be very valuable for you to kind of look into some of these options that we've listed here. One in the form of internships or any kind of research initiatives, especially if it's research during the semester. Those can be very insightful. Externships are another option as well, where you're working for a company, but not necessarily at a local site. And then really getting engaged with various affinity organizations and professional development spaces, such as LSAMP, NSBE, SWE, anything like that, that gives you a chance to really get exposed to different spaces. And then mentorship is critical at every stage, right? Having someone that can be a mentor for you that's a year ahead of you, 5 years, 10 and 20, can really give you some exposure to different insights that I call them blind spots that we often have. They can really help in filling those gaps, right? So just keep that in mind. But for sake of time, we're just going to speed along. And here we have another area, and this is actually something pretty interesting that Antonio will speak on. This is kind of a breakdown of how Eaton does stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Wilson. This is one of those aha moments in my career, I would say, well into 10, 12 years into my career when I stumbled across this. What this is really showing is what we call Eaton's career wheel. If you kind of center that middle right there at the bullseye of this is the CEO. And that CEO, as you could tell, has responsibility and requirement to know and deal with all these various functions that exist. For as many years as I guess jobs have been around, most of us have probably been taught that the path is linear. Your career, your growth potential, your path is always going to be linear. But let's be honest, if you take a step back, if you're having to drive from your house to your favorite restaurant, is it a straight line? No, you have to take right turns, left turns, roundabouts, whatnot to get to that location. And your career is no different. So the first thing I would say is if you've got that mentality that your career is a straight line, get that out of your mind today. What this is showing in these structures are the pyramids obviously are essentially giving you the specific path that could exist, right? From the wider part of the base, let's take operations, right? If you're in the supply chain factory engineer, you know, you get promoted, you go to the next level, senior supply chain, then operations, plant manager, right? You're narrowing your path in that one discipline. When you take a look at that, the higher you go up in that discipline, the higher you go up in the pyramid, the less your chances to go lateral and find some other opportunities. So what this really is telling you, and I want you to take this to heart right now, that is, the broader you can go early in your career, the better you are, because you get exposed to all these various functions at a lesser risk for you and the organization to learn and pick up new skill sets before you can start honing in on the path that you go. I'll be the first to tell you where I am in my career today. If you asked me 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, I would be doing what I'm doing. I would have said there's no way I would have pursued the path that I ended up in. Simply put, it came because I was exposed to things. I had the right people sometimes championing and moving me on, hey, you should try this. Other times it's just taking a simple risk and saying, I'm going to try this different role. That really allowed me to see where by the time I figured out where my passion was, it was nowhere near where I thought it was at the beginning. So various things in your career, and we'll talk about those when we get into the next slides, really would tell you, any employee, whether it's Eaton or otherwise, you are not going to find any person or any group of people that have taken the same exact path to end up where they are. There is just no way you can have two people in an organization with 100,000 employees that will tell you, yep, both of us took the same exact, because in an organization, your opportunities are broader, and the way you approach it really comes down to the path you're willing to take, the risk you want to take, and getting into mapping your own path, not your manager's path. My path is pretty self-explanatory here. My internship really led me to understand that I did not want to do the type of engineering I thought I wanted to do. That changed my path and what my final degree in bachelor's was. I changed from electrical engineering to general engineering because I have more interest in a combination of mechanical and electrical. And I learned that because my internship in electrical engineering is where I learned I will not do that for the rest of my life, right? And from there, I figured out how can I use my technical degree and still interact with people. So I went into sales engineering. Never knew such a career path existed. It brought me out of my shell. I'm a overly, I would say, introverted person, but that gave me an opportunity to be more, push my boundaries. Got into, all kinds of different roles, product specialist, learned that I'm interested in the business side of things, dealing with different customers, from small businesses to large ones. Got my MBA while doing my job to get exposure to that side. Got into plant operations, you couldn't have paid me to work in a plant. That became probably one of the best things that I've ever done from my career, to learn some things and actually learn that's where my passion resided, that it's been hidden all this long. So from there, leading people or getting into marketing, which is where I am right now. Again, there's no way I would have told you, mapped out my plan. This is where I was going to be 20 years in my career. So several of those lateral and diagonal moves, and sometimes making a step back, is how I ended up where I am today.
By far. And I mean, we are a little tight on time, so we can't go into too much detail, but it serves to even recognize from Anthony's story, right? Very often you're going to make lateral movements or diagonal movements even that you don't anticipate. Something that most people don't recognize is that your journey in general is usually dynamic, right? It's, let's say for medical doctors, maybe it might be more straightforward of, hey, I have this.
Not necessarily. Hey, Wilson, let me take 30 seconds here. My wife's a medical doctor, but her undergrad is chemical engineering. Her grad is mechanical engineering. And so she worked in manufacturing. So I'll even debunk that even the pathway to medical doctor is not necessarily a linear path. I know we only have like 3 minutes left, and we do really want to open it up for questions, but the one thing that I wanted to point out on this slide, I don't need to walk through my path, is you have so many factors that affect you on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and not all of them are professional. And I would encourage everybody to balance your work and your life. A lot of people live to work. Some people work to live. Think about that, make your choice, make it wisely, but recognize that if you take some time to enjoy life, you'll be a happier person.
By far. So I mean, these are just some of the examples of the paths that you can go down, right? Again, this is not saying that you should necessarily imitate any of these, but as you can see, it's kind of a game of musical chairs, right? Of some of the spaces you end up, even unknowingly. So just keep that in mind, right? That being said, we do want to kind of wrap up, just kind of reiterating those same points that we touched base on earlier, right? Really recognize from what you can see here, at every point in your career, you are still learning. You are still being a sponge, right? So I'm a sponge, Rod's a sponge, Antona's a sponge, right? Just, all three SpongeBobs, right? But it's important to recognize that there's always areas for you to kind of like identify new things or new spaces of understanding, right? New ways to kind of challenge yourself. So never be afraid to run away from that kind of opportunity, right? Ultimately, as we mentioned about your passion, all of the things on this list can very well change at varying levels in your career. You could be a chemical engineering degree in your bachelor's and decide, you know what, I'm tired of valence electrons, I'm gonna be a mechanical engineer. You go into that, you decide, you know what, dynamics is ridiculous, I'm tired of friction and all that, I'm gonna go into manufacturing and just kind of the operation side of things. And you know what, I wanna save, babies who need surgery or something, and then go into pediatrics, and now you're a doctor. So you never know where you will go, not, no Dr. Seuss pun there, but just always keep in mind that, it's important for you to consider these 5 factors of your life.
Keep it open. Keep it open.
By far. So we do want to allow for some space for questions. So if you guys have any questions, please, speak those now.
Yeah, certainly. I see that we have one question from the Whova portal. Rod, I think you actually touched on this just now, but the question is from Roberto Martinez, and what opportunities are there for chemical engineering students? Fielded to anyone who wants to answer.
Sure. So if this is actually specific to Eaton, we actually have some applied materials positions that we're open to. So if you want to actually connect with us, there's an opportunity to touch base tomorrow at the resource fair, which we will be at, where we'll kind of go through all of the different opportunities available. But specific to chemical, applied materials is definitely something more specialized there. Depending on what skill sets you want to tap into with your chemical background, I would always encourage people to kind of look more broadly also, where you might not get something that utilizes specifically your chemical degree or specialty, but any of the skill sets you develop can come into play also. So for example, I did power systems engineering as my first role, and one of my coworkers who also had that role had a chemical engineering background. So, you know, you can either kind of dabble outside of your specialty, but if you want to lean in more specific, we do have an applications or an applied materials position that's available online.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think, Wilson, simply put, most of us probably have this idea that if I get a degree in X, Y, Z, that's the only thing I'm going to do. And that's not the case. Just remember it this way. The purpose of going to college is to learn how to learn. And when you go into your career, that's exactly what you're going to be taking in. Recently I was clearing out some boxes. I was finding my senior projects and everything else from college. I have not touched a single one of those things in my career. And here I am 20 plus years out, right? Because what I did in college was I learned how to learn. And that's exactly what you're going to do when you're in your career as well, is what you bring to the table is your capability and capacity to learn and to continue to accelerate and move forward.
Now, not to expose the academia syndicate or anything like that, any secret cabals, but as it relates to your major, in a good case, you might use 15% of what you actually learned, major specific, right? Unless you're doing a research heavy job, for the most part in industry, you're barely touching 10%. All those Laplace transforms, Bode plots, and kind of complicated math that you have to do as an engineer, there's calculators and programs that do that for you, right? So, also that's something to consider. If there are aspects of your background that you didn't like, you may not have to actually do those things in the industry. So just keep that in mind. I don't know if you have any other questions.
None yet. And I also, yeah, if you do have a question, please unmute your mic and speak up. Hi, I see we have Carmel. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. I think you're muted right now, but we'd love to hear your question.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question. Hi, team. Just jumping in here. Hi, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of wrapping up the session. This has been really informative. Even for me, I was expecting just to moderate the chat, but I also learned a lot myself, and has been pretty reassuring in my own path, and that my own lack of certainty has been pretty standard, and actually in part a good thing, to do what Rob said, to find your passion first and foremost, and then the money will follow. This is a very relieving thing to hear.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Good deal.
Okay, yeah, so lastly, this session has been recorded and should be available through the Whova app at the latest by next Wednesday. I really encourage y'all to go to the agenda and answer the session survey that is available. This provides really helpful feedback for our speakers. And lastly, thank you for your time, especially the speakers, for sharing on behalf of the corporation. This has been super helpful.
And before you depart, I want to drop a link in. You guys may have already did it, but I wanted to make sure we dropped the link for the yellow registration. So don't close us out.
Appreciate it. We didn't, Carmel, so appreciate you keeping us honest.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep. It looks like the chat is disabled, so I'm not able to drop that in there.
Yeah, I emailed Deb when we started that's been the case, and I guess we're not able to enable chat through this way.
No worries. Come to the booth. You'll be able to meet with the team.
Yeah, so I don't know if we mentioned that earlier, but you all are welcome to drop by our booth tomorrow at 3 o'clock. We have information, virtual cookies, not actual cookies, but you know, stop by.